Peter, what are BlackRock and Vanguard anyway? Aren't they just some finance companies?
That's what they want you to think. But these two giants are the silent owners of the world. You buy groceries? BlackRock owns the supermarket chains. Your medicine? Vanguard holds shares in every pharma giant. Even your mortgage, their money, their rates. Look at the data. Together they hold stakes in Apple, Microsoft, Google, Pfizer, Amazon, even Fox News and CNN. 90% of America's top companies. Their portfolio, through endless shell companies and funds, they control over $20 trillion, more than the entire U.S. economy.
Wait, that can't be real, Peter. They're big, sure, but they're not villains. They're just successful companies.
Brian, shut the hell up. BlackRock and Vanguard aren't just big. They were designed for control. They don't simply invest for profit. They engineer the rules. They pull the strings. They decide who gets funded, who gets silenced, which industries rise, which collapse. They are the infrastructure behind every free market story you've ever heard. This isn't capitalism. It's ownership by design.
How is that even legal? How can two companies have their hands in everything? Tech, pharma, energy, media, banks, and nobody stops them.
It's called institutional ownership. Check any Fortune 500 company. BlackRock and Vanguard Vanguard are always in the top 3 shareholders. They sit on boards, approve CEOs, dictate policy from the shadows.
How do we know what's real anymore?
You don't. Well, you fight over which brand is better. Both belong to them. BlackRock and Vanguard hold stakes in both Fox and CNN. There's no opposing narrative. It's all managed, 2 faces, 1 master.
So if they wanted, could they crash markets, start wars, even pick presidents?
Their algorithms, like Aladdin, manage over $21 trillion. If they pull out, countries collapse. Even central banks use their software. You see companies? They see pawns.
Ownership is invisible. Power is absolute.
But who owns the owners? Who audits BlackRock and Vanguard?
Nobody. Their largest shareholders are themselves in endless cross-ownership loops. No law, no nation, no voter can touch them. So tell me, do you still think you own anything?
Peter,
Hello, good evening and welcome to another Webster report on this Sunday, the 19th of April, 2026 on our Gregorian calendar. Started off with that one because of, I see a lot of articles recently, particularly by the Scouse Oracle, talking about Palantir, and the NHS and the data that's going to be farmed from all this. And we're talking about those companies there. Under the Patriot Acts, all that data that Palantir American company hold, the US agencies have access to. So where's the potential of this going, Alex? And you're still muted, by the way.
Well, that's a really good opening. I think pretty much sums it up. What I would say is, because it's incredibly complex, if you don't walk in the corridors of power, you need to see the connection between money and control. They're not exactly the same thing, but they bear a very close connection. So if you don't separate them, you end up in the worst expressions of thinking that gets typically labeled conspiracy theory, as if there was a plan from the beginning, whatever the beginning is, which would imagine that plans don't evolve over time in line with power and not just general interests or universal interests, but very specific local interests. When you have tribalism, you have local interests. So all these things evolved from a place where humans were doing stuff. Some became more powerful than others based on the warfare principle of Cain killing Abel when sin got in, crouching at the door, desiring to master Cain. And God rebuked him and said, it's not the end of the world, you just have to master it. And he didn't. And that was pretty much prototypical for human beings who tend to get into these win-lose, zero-sum arrangements. Well, if I have power over you, what do I have to do to get that power? What short-term, medium-term and long-term advantages can I acquire? If I consolidate imperial power over time, great, I have no challenges. If I can't do that, and I've got limited control over a territory or an empire, I'll try and make an agreement or a pact with somebody else equally powerful so that we together cannot kind of share the kingdom. Now, obviously, there's still, if you're totally voracious with a massive appetite, a lust for power and money, you'll secretly want to cannibalize that other partner. That's what you see in corporatocracy, rather than strictly government. But government and corporates are in bed together. That's another example of 2 types of organization with similarities but differences. And one can co-opt the other. So you can see them as being in some sort of conflict of power. And a good example of why it's not simple, but there's definitely correlation, is in what happened in Hungary, because we did not. It kicked off Sunday evening, just as the show was going out. So I hadn't really seen much about it. And at first I was full of, I thought, Orban's out, I don't believe it. Terrible. Von der Leyen going on there, and Europe looked like they've struck a victory. And then it seemed like, well, maybe part of Taylor's Q narrative, an aspect of it, even if it's not Q, it shows you that sometimes there's a bit of strategy going on. So potentially Orban and this Magyar guy may have made a pact to a truce behind the scenes, not let on, portrayed it as a populist movement that was going to boot out tyrant Orban. And then, you know, the EU opens the gob and says, yeah, brilliant. This is what the EU is going to be. And they're all like gloating. They're all talking about what a victory it is for democracy in the face of the far right sort of influences. And then he doubles down and he says, no, we're not doing this. We're not doing that, which is sending shockwaves through the EU. We don't know where that will end up. But interestingly, it shows or it illustrates very clearly that pacts can operate on many levels, many coalitions of interest, and smaller entities can come together. They can conglomerate and take on quite a bit of relative power, much more power than people like you and me can, Paul. I mean, in a way, we're a form of media now. How bizarre. We might only get, 20 or 30 viewers on the live and 200 to 300, but we're a form of media. So technically, we have more power than the viewers. And, bigger stations than this have more power and influence and clout than we do. So it's all relative. But at the end of the day, money and control go hand in hand, but not completely, because eventually power bases can come together and cooperate together to topple bigger forces. So yeah, there is a big monopoly at the top. They do seem to have everything stitched up, but I don't think it means it's hopeless. I just think it means it's going to be a tough battle. But we saw in Hungary that things don't always necessarily appear, they appear one way, and in reality there can be something different going on.
Well, the fella who's took over in Hungary, straight away when you see him wearing a small hat with the Star of Remfang on it, he's telling you which side he's playing for, Alex. It tells you what side he's on. Now, there is a pact, and we've spoken before about the Muslim Brotherhood and the Jewish rabbinical priesthood and how they seem to agree on at some level. I've spoken with Muslim friends who said the Muslim Brotherhood sold out years ago. We've heard it with other parties, in the past, Black Panthers, they stood for something, then they didn't, then they did again. It's the same old stuff that we always get brought forward. It's the same thing that's always worked. So now, do we see that Europe is now going to go into that multicultural mode that we've been going into all this time? Because, when you're looking at Muslim ministers in Belgium who are saying that if you don't like the culture where, they're just in the middle of the street, they're just going to pray. Now, that's about dominance. That's not about going to your mosque and praying. That's about dominance. We can't go into their country and do that. We can't go into any other people's countries and do that. But there's something mystical about this. I can't call it a religion because it's an ideology when you're looking at the Islamists, and that's what we see that is being flooded. We're not looking at our friends who we speak with. They're not interested in that. But does their religion mean that if that comes to this country, they have to then conform? Because if they don't, they're no different to me and you, Alex. And we're seeing this happen on a massive scale. So if there's a control about this, if there's a management about this, which we clearly see there is, then it doesn't really matter that Liverpool have just won the derby at the new Goodison Park, does it? It doesn't matter. None of that matters, but that's the most important thing still to a lot of people. And having been there, I understand it. But when you start to know this truth and you know that the powers that be, which aren't the people that we see, but these people that are pulling the strings, we only see what they believe in, what they want, what they're going to strive for. How are they going to do it? Well, just look at what they're going to do. If they collapse the economy, Alex, it's a free-for-all. They're going to create something out of this chaos. But as you said, it's not too late. There's more people been switched on in the last 5 years than I've seen in the last 15. All of a sudden. But it's stopping them arguing things that we knew didn't work 10 years ago. People are still being guided into talking about certain things. Let's get to the root. We need to get to the root. If we don't dig the root out, it's never going to go away. So we've got to get to these simplistic roots. Where do we give our power away? Because it is all down to us at the end of the day. It's taking this power back, and it's the least impact possible. So the system, nothing wrong with it. Who's running it, how it's being run, and how we are acting in it. We could start it tomorrow, but it's organization. Something's got to give. Something will have to come to the crux of it. We see it in Ireland now. I mean, I've seen articles posted where there's a new version of the IRA, and they're talking about the culture, the language, the country, the heritage, the women, the children. They're talking about protecting them now. So, you know, we're doing the same old stuff again, Alex. We're just going to keep repeating this if we can't, you know, break this cycle.
Yeah, I think that the issue here for me is quite deep. You know, people want to get into planning mode, but really it's about competence. Competence is far more important than planning, and not enough people are competent. So if you look at the culture war, as you've kind of just outlined it, the issue is there. We've only got to this place because people weren't sufficiently interested in protecting the culture. Now, if you look at what God said in the Old Testament about his judgment, he said, when you start to move away from me and you start to allow alien cultures to infiltrate, you will take on board their practices. And those practices are out of resonance or alignment with healthy practices of order, which will maintain or uphold the order. Now, once people start doing that, whatever the motivation is, you know, in the Old Testament is typically considered to be idolatry, whatever that means. You know, there's like a bust or a head of a god, and that god is supposed to possess that head and become its proxy on earth. But whatever that actually translates to, people were relying, call it superstitiously or for whatever reason, on these other deities that were largely considered to be present within idols. And Yahweh was, I am that I am. I'm a God who's not going to be constrained by these human dimensions. And, you know, I think there are all kinds of idols. And what are idols, essentially? They are human beings' attempts to take a force, which we might call God or divine power, say, and bring it under human dominion and control. You know, effectively, if I can concentrate the presence of this God into this idol, then in a way, I'm securing some sort of control over it. And this is what Yahweh said, no, it isn't going to be like that. You won't make these graven images because you cannot put me in a box, just like you can't put a God in a statue. And this is what humans have tried to do. When you do that, typically, the human is seeking control over the God. Why and how? By using laws, legislating. And that legislation encodes the priorities of that human being or that coterie of human beings who've come together to secure power. Then they will legislate, they'll create laws, they'll structure society and culture. So we only get to this point where we talk about, say, in this case, the Irish stepping up and saying, our culture's being attacked and undermined. It's only because it's got to a critical point that they're bothered. The rest of the time, they weren't bothered about that culture. They were just living it. But who knows how faithfully they were living it? What is an Irish culture? You know, it's like, what is Morris dancing, for example? You know, or what is Irish folk dance? Or what is it to play a particular Irish bagpipe? You know, that's a part of the culture. So let's just say those cultural traditions were dying out amongst the Irish, but nobody saw it as being a threat that was imposed by an external force. They'd let that thing die out. They weren't crying out about aspects of the culture then and their identity. It's only when an external force comes in that they suddenly wake up. And this is what God was talking about in the Old Testament. You know, if you keep slipping and sliding, just veering away a little bit from the line, thinking everything's okay, but it's self-serving, you wake up in a couple of years' time and things are going to be really drastic. You're going to get invaded by these foreign powers. You weren't relying on me. Then you'll need to call out to me, but I'm not going to listen at that time because you brought it on yourself. But in the end, thankfully, he always said, but I am merciful. I will remember my people. If you repent, if you seek me, there's always a way back. But the question is, what are we going back to? What cause are we fighting for? Are we trying to reinstate a culture that we didn't care about enough in the first place? You know, it's like everybody wakes up when there's something at stake for them. But what about ultimately truth? What about the bigger picture? You know, if you're just docile and then something happens, you wake up because it's a crisis, then the crisis is averted and you go back to sleep. I can't really see that having much merit, mate.
No, we're definitely the hard men have created the soft times, and we're now in the next part of that process. You know, this is where dictatorships have taken over with in the past. We're seeing communism and fascism being discussed as, you know, potential for solving our economic issues. You know, we know this doesn't work, Alex. We know that the system is set up because after the war, the debt, blah blah blah. So we know that the current structure that we have is that taxes are taken, we do our bits wherever we can job wise. The elderly are looked after, the young ones are brought up, educated, and, you know, go into whatever field of profession they want. The ones who are ill, sick, then we look after them, but we look to help them, fix them, make them better. Whereas we haven't got any of those structures in there. We've got the infrastructure, but we haven't got any content within it, any of that structure to do all that, because we're too busy trying to work extra to pay bills we're not liable for, to pay taxes we're not liable for, because we're already paying out, but we've run away from the shop, given the keys over to management, and now they think they're running it. We've forgotten that we actually own it. And because of how we've been taught, we've registered everything in a certain way. Legally, they can just pretend that they own it. And because we don't absolutely point to where we're the owners and get rid of the ambiguity, then it leaves all this open. But they've used this time very wisely. They've locked people up. They've put inflation on things. They've a potential lockdown coming up again. What happens then? Because we've lost so many jobs. We've got 9 million people on benefits. You know, that's treble what I remember ever being unemployed. I remember when it touched something like 3 million in the early 80s, and it was like, you know, desperate measures type thing. Keir Starmer's talking about making people work from home because of the fuel crisis. The petrol's gone down here, mate. It's not gone down much, but it's gone down. I'm speaking to people about supplies for their businesses, as in food and meat and things like that. There's no issues. So why is the media drumming all that up? Is it drumming it up ready so that people were you know, they've done the job, they've told people. They're priming the mass society for something else. Now, we're being directed is that it's an Islam problem. Islamists, all this kind of problem. They hate Jews, and Jews are getting firebombed, and we're all looking at Muslims. But we're being directed to that. So even though that's obviously some kind of an issue in some places in this country, we see the issues throughout Europe. A Belgian minister saying, if you don't like this culture, you can leave. You know, she's an immigrant, now a minister, and she's telling Belgians that they can leave if they don't like the culture that's come in. And our society's been brainwashed into accepting that that's tolerance, that's diversity. You've got people who will argue for all that. But where's our heritage? Where's our culture? I mean, I don't know what that really means. I know what I grew up in. I knew that we had hardworking people who, you know, they worked hard, they played hard, but they paid all the bills and all. I thought that was a structure, a blueprint for life. But then I see it's not. And then I see the lies. I see the fraud that's going on. You know, the worst criminals I ever met are solicitors and judges. Some know what they're doing, obviously, and others may not. They may just be following a process. But at the end of the day, we have funded this prison and we've been guided into it. It doesn't matter who we vote for. I mean, we could even vote for the Greens, Alex, and really make a good go of this.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to complete the brain drain, I mean, The thing is, culture is basically shared ways of life. Now, you can get subcultures, countercultures, and everything that resist bigger cultures. There's always interfaces between cultures, and that's why multiculturalism can be a problem. If the underlying ideological roots are vastly different or opposed, you have this big problem. But coming back to things like competence, really, in a way, you culture it. If it's not coherent, if it's not, got a religious community or a, like me, I started playing chess again at the chess club. You get like a culture within the broader culture, and you get solidarity out of that. And if you're not going to plan, you need competence. And culture will come to you if you don't impose yourself on it. It will come to your door, like the tide inexorably will come to your door, and it could wash you away. So if we're, should we say, a bit mentally flabby, and we don't really do our diligence, and we don't protect the boundary, we're going to get colonized. So to me, that's why competence is more important than plans. Like, I picked up my copy of the Quran earlier and started reading it because I thought, I have to get a better grasp if I want to engage Muslims on any level or the whole debate. I need to have a better grasp of it than they do. But obviously, from my theological perspective, so it's still going to be coloured by my vantage point. But again, if we say to people, well, how can you have a view about the Bible if you've not really engaged with it? It's now become a fact of life that when this was a traditionally Christian country and there were a few immigrants in it, why would you need to read the Quran? It seems to me that indigenous British people, might now need to become acquainted with what is becoming a bit of a major force, which is shaping political life as well, local life, cultural life, talk of Sharia law. You can't speak against Sharia law just because you're reactionary to it. So again, coming back to what I like to now take the mickey out of Megasaurus in a very gentle way, sociologically speaking, at the end of the day, we've got to look at the impacts of religious communities, ideologies, doctrines upon politics, upon culture, upon society. It isn't strictly just theological or religious, it's cultural, and it's at the interface between culture and religion. So if we take no interest in that, go, that's boring. Well, you're going to abdicate responsibility and you're not going to have competence. In other words, you're not going to be able to step up. You'll be in the question time audience talking like a liberal lefty about generic humanitarian values and why we should just be very loving towards migrants, full stop, and preach love, not hate, and criticise Nigel Farage's, far right, whatever that means. And we'll be able to speak in imprecise language, not knowing what we're talking about, because we've been programmed by people using the same language. Most people are just parrots. They copy. They've got a very simple or crude ethics, and then they cling on to what powerful figures say. It's a risk that we face. If we speak intelligently or with a bit of charisma, people might go, oh, right, yeah, well, listen to that person. They might regurgitate it to somebody else with no understanding whatsoever for themselves. If you don't build a framework for yourself, if you don't build foundations, if you don't engage with life and culture, whatever that happens to be, you're always going to be a passenger watching everything pass you by and just coming out with generic statements which are never going to change anything. That's not competence. That's going to put you back to the wall. And then you're going to get involved in all kinds of unsavory movements where you'll ally with other people who are equally stupid. This is the thing about the Greens. These are all these morons. And it's so easy to leverage against reform by just manipulating the demographic. They've got it down to a T. Most people can't see what's going on. They don't think, why did Zach Polanski turn up from nowhere? They'll talk about opinion polls being massaged, but when you look at how it's being manufactured, the Greens are popular, the Greens are really growing in strength. Anyone with a brain can see that nothing's changed in the last 8-9 months, other than a bit of profile from the media making out that Polanski and a few others have got into a few council positions, and somebody's like, the Greens are surging, the Greens are the alternative to reform. And they're obviously not. But if people are stupid enough to believe that rhetoric, which many are, they'll start thinking this is a viable platform. We can connect with this now. Labour's not relevant. Get on with the Greens, and not actually scrutinise the policies and the insanity that the Greens are actually perpetuating. But people don't care about that because humans are tribal. And do you remember the Big Brother house? Do you remember at first you had to vote? You had to vote who you wanted to stay in, but then in the end, they got you to vote for who you wanted to get out. They shifted the format, and this is how most people work now and how politics works. I don't like them, And that plays into the system, because if they can create enough anti-Farage sentiments, they can water it down. And regardless of what you think of Farage or any other political option, the reality is, within the mainstream now, he's the only possibility of change within the mainstream. Even if it doesn't pan out, and even if when he gets in, he changes some stuff, and therefore you've got to vote for Farage. And then if he gets in and he doesn't deliver, that's when the people, because all those people who've become increasingly disillusioned over months and years, will pin everything on Farage. So if he gets in and doesn't deliver, their patience will snap. So I think we've got to push to say, at least this guy tells it like it is about migration. And if you vote for him, brilliant, he could get in and change it. And then if he doesn't, if he's just a system dupe, there's no plan B after that. It'll all come crashing down. So for me, it's pretty obvious why they're trying to sideline him. And, you know, populism is not allowed, like I said the other week, unless it's Green Party populism.
I think we're in a very dangerous position, because most people, in fact, everyone that I know has never read a manifesto of who they've ever voted for. Most have voted for Labour because the dad did, because it was Whitkinmon's party and all that kind of stuff, all that rhetoric. I don't see anything changing of that. I see a lot of, you know, if your mate Polanski would have been about 30 years ago, he'd have had no chance. He'd have been like stood with the Monster Raving Looney Party and on the subjects he's talking about. But society's changed, Alex. You know, maybe we're looking at these politics from a different angle to what society's looking at it now, because I think it's bloody obvious that there's no point in voting. And nobody's talking about what the alternative to non-voting would be. Some have mentioned a national strike. You know, when I was in the prison service, we used to talk about not doing overtime, but you'd never get it. You always had bandits who'd keep that going, because money, you know, the love of money, and especially when people are put into desperate measures, they'll do almost anything. We've seen it, and that we've seen society get worse because of it. We've seen people being killed for pence, for a few quid and stuff like that, or disrespect. You know, somebody sucked through my teeth, so I stabbed him in the face. Society's changed. So who are politics playing to? Who's watching them? Are they just taking those bits of narrative? It's like when you said about the Quran, to engage people, you need to know something about the Quran that, you know, for most Muslims that I've known personally, not many read their own Quran, and certainly none of them ask questions. You know, it's the Imam, and then when they go to the Imam with questions, it's Allah knows best. So there's no learning from that. It's just a faith. Well, where are you putting your faith? Well, if in that case, it looks like you're putting it into a bloke. And I know that all blokes are liars. So what doctrine, what pages, what scriptures could I look at that is pretty strong that everybody attacks? So it's the Bible. When we get to the Quran says the previous scriptures are good. Go and look at them. Go and speak to the people who have that book, the Torah and the Injil. But then Muslims will say, well, Muhammad is named in the Torah and the Injil. And you ask them where it is, and they can't name it. And then they say, well, the Bible's corrupt. So if we just start saying, oh, well, our scriptures say this, so the Quran's corrupt, that means there's nothing there. But when you've got 700, at least, Catholic, you know, Christian religions that all disagree with each other, and they all disagree with the scriptures, then we've got a massive issue. So when we stand on this Bible, Alex, it seems like you're stood in such a position that you're against everybody, even the ones that say, hey, there's some good bits in there, but it's not true. And it was written by men. I heard a Muslim arguing yesterday that, yeah, but the Gospels were written by men. And the question was, well, who wrote the Quran? Oh, it was given by God to Muhammad. Yeah, but who wrote it down? Muhammad's followers. So it was written by men. Well, yeah, well, we have to discount it then because it was written by men. No, it's not like that. Now, for me, even if I didn't have a dog in the fight, Alex, for me on the outside looking in, I'm going, that's ridiculous. That's a ridiculous comment. And to hear some of these apologetics going on both sides, they're trying to win an argument over a verse or this. It seems to have taken a life on its own. You know, when Russ used to come on, he's gone off doing apologetics. Is it to win people over to Jesus, or is it to win an argument? You know, we seem to be in a society that loves arguing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I just noticed a comment in the chat from Tinfoil Tribe. Hello, Tinfoil Tribe. Evening, lads. Any good news? Right. So
Yeah.
I'll use that as a segue.
Put in the chat room. Put in the chat room. Liverpool won the derby.
Well, I know, but I was thinking it's interesting because obviously when you're part of the Tinfoil Tribe, which many people watching this would be, you're part of a counterculture. When you're a counterculture and you're recognizing the state of the world, and you're the one swimming against the tide and saying, don't take them, vaccines are full of toxins. And when you're taking, you know, the police constabularies and you're serving treason notices, you're part of the Tinfoil Tribe, forming a counterculture against the bad news that's been inflicted upon us by the controlling elites. And that seems to be what being part of our particular Tinfoil Tribe is about. But actually, the good news is that there is a good news. And in Greek, good news is euangelion, which is in fact the Injil, because that's the basis for evangel, which means good news. Angel is message. You is good. So it's good news. So that's the gospel. So yeah, absolutely. In the face of all this countercultural stuff, where we have to be a part of this Tinfoil Tribe that meets here every week, and we have to put our tinfoil hat on and get labelled that, we are trying to preserve a counterculture against the prevailing culture, and we get labelled as extremist, others get labelled as far right, so we get silenced and deplatformed as well. So the good news is the Evangelion, the gospel of Jesus Christ, which is, I'd say, the best news that we can imagine. And that, of course, takes down all sectarianism, unless, of course, the church manages to reintroduce it again, which typically it has done, turning it into versions of doctrine and ideas and emphases and so on, which has undermined the unity. But the good news fundamentally, when it's stripped back, is that there is a remedy to this problem. But then it's a case of, well, what side are you on? And that's the question that everybody's asking, because nobody can agree what the sides are. And that's a typical religious debate that affects Christianity as well. But from my perspective, the good news is the gospel.
It's the only thing that I found out that was stand out. It was different to everything else, from religions that have gods of everything, a god of absolutely everything, wind, grass, trees, seeds, birds, everything. Then you've got three main religions that all seem to hover around the same scriptures. So you've got the Old Testament Jews that believe there's an earthly Messiah that hasn't come yet. These seem to be related towards the synagogue of Satan, and these seem to be the ones that killed Jesus. They've then written in their own hands their versions of what they believe the Torah represented, and started to teach more of what they believed rather than what God had written. Then we've got Islam that seem to point to all the scriptures and say, yeah, this Quran confirms those scriptures, and Muhammad, the prophet, the last prophet, is in those scriptures. Jesus told you about him. Right, where is that? And we go and look for it, and there isn't one. And then they'll say, well, he's named Ahmed. Well, Ahmed and Muhammad have very different meanings in Arabic. And I don't speak Arabic, but I know people who do, and they say that, yeah, it's a very different meaning. When we ask questions about that, that's, oh, no. And then you have to have the hadiths to actually join the gaps that are within the Quran verses, because you can't read it through and understand it. You need something to tell you. Well, the Mormons also have that version as well. there's other Christian religions that have this version. Yeah, you can't read those scriptures because you need this special book, or you need this special name, and you need to say his name in a certain way. Yet the Bible says that's a load of rubbish. Come and speak with me. Come and reason with me. Come and read my word. I will, the Holy Spirit will bring this to you. That's the difference in what the scriptures say compared to every religion. And I stood in front of a 5-ton Buddha after being inducted into Taoism, or a form of Taoism, where again, after being stood with druids, banging drums, saying, what the bloody hell am I doing here? I'm stood in front of this saying, what am I doing here? Nothing felt right till I read that. But it was there all the time, Alex, and I'd never bothered reading it. That was the massive thing for me. When I read it, I understood logically how it stood out. I'm the only way. Everybody went, no, that's not true. I went, bloody hell. There's something different about this. So I thought, before I was a believer, I thought, well, if this is true, everybody's got a bit of a problem. There's a big issue here for everybody. If it's not true, then it doesn't matter. We'll just all laugh about it. Oh, Webby, you know, but all that stuff. But the more I read it, the more it made sense. And then when that flame goes on in the heart and it changes that feeling about everything, you know, stuff that you were doing, you just go, oh, I don't want to do that now. No, I can't. No, I don't want to. I'm getting an understanding of, I've been brought into a fallen world and I've been taught a life that, you know, mechanically, nuts and bolts, I know is wrong, Alex. Well, can I pay your bills? That's rubbish. It's bollocks. We've funded these people forever. And, you know, as you say, what is there's no organisation, so people are going to have to vote. You know, the majority of people people I speak with are still talking about voting. So they're going to have to get another kick in the balls or punch in the face or whatever. But what if it's the last? What if things really ramp up? What if Farage, who looks like and says everything that people want, but nobody reads his manifesto and with parliamentary privilege can tell lies? Then we've got another fair few bad things coming down the pipeline. But we'll have to see if people switch on a bit quicker this time, Alex. Yes, as you say, it's not that there's no hope. Of course, there's hope, but I think people are going to have to get their hands a bit dirty this time themselves, because it's your family, it's your children. You know, what are we going to do? We're just going to let this play out until it knocks on your door. What if you're the last one in your street?
Yeah. Well, the problem is if people don't ask questions, and I mean every kind of question, they're left with assumptions. I don't think assumptions are a luxury we can afford. If the people in charge, in control, who are supposed to be stewards of government to ensure that things operated properly, are corrupt, I don't think we can afford to maintain these assumptions, but they are unusually resilient. So the example I give is, most people operate on the assumption that a table has 4 legs, and they might conclude that a table can still be a stable table if it has 3 legs. But immediately they will say, because of the concept of a table that they don't think about, that a table with 2 legs will fall over, or a table with 1 leg is impossible. And at surface level, as an image in your mind, that might appear true, but it's an assumption, because you can have a table with 1 leg and 4 feet, right? And so it stands stable on the 4 feet. So then you've got to refine your definition and go, it's got to have a stable base. What you can have a table with a solid central pillar and a square base that's solid, with a big enough surface area, and it will be stable. So almost like 2 pieces of wood of equal size with 1 thick piece of wood between it will form a table. It'd be an unusual table, but you know, you could use it as a table. So would it still be a table? Well, in most people's mind, It wouldn't be. So then is a table just its functionality? Or if you went to the subatomic level, and this is where it's going to get interesting, it's mainly space. Now, the point is, all religions, that includes Christianity and the Bible, every single one of them was never designed to be a metaphysical system where people thought metaphysical thoughts about the nature of reality, because that isn't what religions are designed to do. They were always designed to provide a form of order that simple everyday people living a busy life could adhere to. This is why Sabbath rules were very clear at the beginning. 6 days shall you labour, and then you shall set aside 1 day specially, and you shall remember me on that day. That's not because it's set in stone, because that's the way God loves it, like wear green corduroy on a Friday, green corduroy trousers on a Friday, because I say so. It's not arbitrary. It's intrinsic to the structure of reality that involves creatures. Creatures are finite, limited, they tire, they can't be everywhere at once. So if they're in one place working and getting tired out, because after the fall, there'll be thorns and thistles and the sweat of your brow will follow you around. You need to rest. So it's not that God has this fetish about having a day off every week. It's he understands that for 6 days out of the 7, people who just get on with doing stuff that, is stuff that people do within creation. They've got to structure time. They've got to be productive. They've got to have outputs. But on 1 day, you need to set it aside. And most people want to stay at that level. That's why they then follow prescriptions and become overly anal retentive about it. It's got to be 1 day. It's got to be on this day. They don't see deeper because they want the simplicity of the guidance. Just follow this rule and you'll be all right. The reality is now we don't have that luxury. Even when you look at Enoch, the time has come when the deeper understanding of the metaphysical realities has got to come to the surface. So, you can just say, well, it's a table. And Islam will say, well, it's this kind of table. Christianity will say it's that kind of table. Buddhism will say it's this kind of table. But they'll all say it's a table. And why is that? Because the primary or source documents were all designed to make life livable for human beings. That doesn't tell us the deep things of God. I'm not suggesting we should all become Gnostics and just tie ourselves in knots thinking about these things and refuse to live practical life or become a monastic. But now we've got these serious challenges ahead of us. Like, what is the nature of God? So I'll just give an example. We've got to be able to line up now the stories that we've had from the beginning with the deeper metaphysical truths about God. What is God showing us? What does it mean to say God is love without it just becoming sentimental claptrap? Like, you can't stop migrants coming into your country. You've got to have open borders because God is love. That's a massive jump. And what's happened is humanism has displaced theology there, and it's just, it's just lazy. So we've got to think deeper. Now, the way I parallel it, if you remember the science fiction writer who's also a trained chemist, Isaac Asimov, he wrote loads of books like I, Robot, for example. He also wrote a book that was factual, based on his knowledge of chemistry, called Extraterrestrial Civilizations. I picked it up when I was 17, and it talks about the probabilistic likelihood of life on other planets based on an understanding of the universe. And I'm not going to get into cosmology and the physics of cosmology and the solar system and flat earth and everything else. We're just presuming his model had some accuracy to it. He was doing these calculations and he was working out the probability of certain sizes of star, certain sizes of planet, how far those planets were from the star. And he basically talked about something called the habitable zone, which was it had to be sufficiently close to the star, but not too close, not too far away. And certain other factors need to be in place. Obviously, it needs to have oxygen on the planet. When you look at that, he went through all these factors in this systematic way, and it was really interesting, and it really struck me at the time, even though I was an atheist. And it came back to me the other day. This is the reality, really. When you get down beneath it all, the metaphysics, God. Most of the systems there about God, they say, okay, so you've got to be in some sort of relationship to God if you're not an atheist. And Christianity is distinct to all the other positions. And that habitable zone is a really good metaphor, because most of these other religious systems, they have this gravitational pull idea. And what happens is they're so focused on their concept of God, quite apart from the religious stories that they're dressed up in, that they get sucked into the star. So imagine the star, if you take that traditional approach to how solar systems and stars work, the gravitational pull on that planet will pull it into that star, a bit like a black hole would pull anything within the Schwarzschild radius. It would just crush it on, suck it under gravitational pull. That's why it's a black hole. No light can escape. So what happens in most theological systems is they become monistic. Deepak Chopra type stuff as well in these, contemporary spiritualities. You get sucked into God and you lose your individual identity. You lose your free will. The whole goal is just to become an extension of God. The opposite way is the atheists and those who don't believe at all, who think it's all random and meaningless. They're the opposite. They get totally outside of the gravitational pull and they drift further and further away from the star, the sun in our case, and they go into oblivion. So that's being completely lost. They're not able to orbit around that star and stay in a habitable zone. So there's a width ecologically where if that planet is within that distance, and it can sustain life. So what Christianity does, when you trace it back underneath its stories, it's really clear. It's a balance. It's the right balance between being close to God, but not being obliterated, not having your free will completely smashed, but not so asserting your free will that you become rebellious and say, in order to be free, I've got to fire this God off, because any concept of God is tyranny. So there are two equal and opposite errors, and all the religions and atheism go to one extreme or the other. They either drift off and lose the gravitational hold that God has, which maintains coherence and sustains life, or they get sucked into the star. It's the same with Islam. Its basic position is submission, and everything is the will of Allah. So basically, your job is to conform to the will of Allah. That's it. It doesn't matter if every part of your human life is obliterated. Just become a robot droid who conforms to the will of Allah. It's the same with Stoicism. It's the same with Taoism in its purest form. Work out what's going on, same with Buddhism, and align with it. So then you just become an extension of the divine principle. You have no independent identity, no real free will. Your job is to surrender your free will. That's what Christian message is not that. God says, I want you to become fully actualized, fully individuated. I want you to fully choose me with your free will. Not because you're coerced, not because I said, wear green corduroy pants on a Friday, otherwise you're going to hell. No. But most religious systems suck the individual identity and conform it completely to God. So we just become robots. Or the equal and opposite error is we drift off into space, we become atheists, we say, I can't be free if God exists because he's a tyrant. Christianity doesn't do that. And I think that's a major difference. And because we don't think at that level, we just stay at the level of the story. Everyone goes, yeah, the table should have 3 legs. No, you can't have a table with 2 legs. Yeah, but you can have a table with 2 legs and then 2 bases to support the table. So you can have a table with 1 leg. And people are arguing about which is the right table. And that's the problem. You can't just analyze at the level of the story. You've got to say, is this story that's presented to us so we can live our life consistent with underlying notions about God that make sense? Most people don't take it that far. They just believe what religious authorities tell them. And we can't afford to live in a world like that anymore, Paul.
Definitely not. But where I see the religion, particularly, I mean, you've used the term Christianity a few times. The Catholics claim that they practice Christianity. This is why we've got to be a little bit more thorough with our terms. The Bible itself, if we say that's Christianity, then that is totally different to any religion. Why? Because the Old Testament taught us religion. Why? Because we couldn't discern. We didn't know what to do. We had to be told. We had to have that 6 days on, 1 day off. We had to have this structure for all these diets and stuff like that of what's bad for us, because we need to know what's bad for us so we know the goodness. But we don't have to keep experiencing the badness. But we've always chose that, no, I want to know how bad it is. I want to go and do that. I'm going to go and do that. And if you're around people who are that little bit of leaven that say, did he say that? Why can't you do that? So all of a sudden you've got a religion that has to counteract people who are saying, go on, have a go at it. Go down to the temple, have sex with the prostitutes. It's all to Yahweh. We've already sorted it. We've paid a few quid. We signed a piece of paper. We can pray to Yahweh down there, and we can have sex with the prostitutes, and we can get closer to him. Just try it. Just try it once. And there's loads of food down there as well. Don't tell them that it's sacrificed to other gods. This is why it had to be in stone. Follow this. Want to follow this. If you don't want to follow it, if you don't want to know the true God, and these people saw. So it's not even a case of if you witness something, will you send Lazarus to go and tell me dad that I've died and you've got to do this? No, he won't listen to him because he's had Moses, he's had the prophets, and he still didn't listen. You didn't listen. So all of that was because the hearts were hard. After the cross, it's a different ballgame, Alex. That's why all these religions have been left, because there's only one way. And we're arguing about the table, but we're not looking at what the ground that the table's standing on.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think this is the point. Anyone who lives or seeks to live an integrated life should be asking questions. If something doesn't add up, and you don't ask, why does it not add up? Well, you're suppressing something, aren't you? Ultimately, part of our design is to be able to recognize things. That's what our brain is all about. Does this connect with this? Is this coherent? Really, human beings are designed for coherence. So it's amazing how much incoherence we put up with. That's why, joking apart, I find it incredible. The Green Party is such a fantastic test of the fact that we've completely lost coherence. People coming out with just outrageous nonsense that's got nothing to do with anything real. And if it's only because we became so dumb as a culture that we can tolerate that kind of just pure nonsense. It is insane. It is insane. And because people lack the tools anymore to differentiate between different levels of reality, it's like I keep saying about once, and let's call it true religion, because we can get into kind of word salad about it. Once you lose that, in the truest, purest sense, it's connected to faith and relationship to God, you do end up with these entrenched problems that you just can't get away from. This coherence is a bottom line. It's a bottom line. It's a total ecosystem, and once you start violating it, it's like a kingdom standing against itself. It's not. It just isn't going to stand. So I think we have a responsibility to lay down a marker, and it's like, well, what does a coherent life look like? Now, Jesus said, I've come that they might have life and have it more abundantly. What does that actually mean in practice? So this is where I take a point from when Tinfoil Tribe made this statement. There is a really valid aspect to that about what the good news is. Because if it's just for the afterlife, then it's like, yeah, we have struggle now, but is that it? There is suffering. We know that. We see it in scripture, and suffering builds character. But is there not more? Can we not expect that we would be blessed as well if we get things right? I don't mean entitled, I passed the exam and I got a reward. But it's like, living right, living coherent. Should it not produce more coherence? And we are definitely designed to be coherent. So it's obviously something that we lose. Now, why do we lose it? Probably because we failed to protect it. But we've got to do some serious work now with people, because if you look at it, if somebody like Zach Polanski can be credible in any universe, we have a really big problem. We have a really big problem. People look at him and can vote for him. We're in trouble. We really are. And it's a massive measure of the IQ of the country.
Well, I saw that measure, mate, with what happened with COVID. But let's just go back to looking at what these patterns are that we've been observing recently. And, you know, we've had the first pattern on when I started the show with that video. Let's see what this brings. And remember that Carrie Mullis was the inventor of the PCR, who was telling people not to go off these results because it wasn't diagnostic. But there again, people was not listening. People couldn't understand it. They couldn't discern it.
AIDS is not a disease, right? AIDS is a whole lot of different things. Depends on what country you're in.
How do they decide whether they're positive or negative?
We cannot tell because we are using a rapid test.
It occurred to me that perhaps the HIV epidemic is reported to be so widespread in South Africa and other poor nations simply because they use these inaccurate tests.
The CDC was looking for something like that when it came along. They were looking for it already. They were hoping there was going to be a new plague because polio was over. The CDC's budget was getting decreased. This is back in like the early 80s.
Padian runs a study. It's a 10-year study with the world's most virulent, terrifying sexually... I mean, this thing jumps, off of penises into vaginas miles away. How many of them do you think, after 10 years, with the world's most terrifying, virulent, sexually transmitted disease came up positive? Nobody.
AIDS.
So what do we take from it, Alex? You know, we've got these patterns that are forming. I mean, back in the 80s, that was a pandemic. That was going everywhere. But we've since learned that the medication was actually lowering all the immune systems and causing this pandemic after they were looking for it by using the PCR test to find things that seem like a pandemic, that just exactly how they've used it 40 years later. And, you know, the public still bought it, mate.
It's what I'm talking about. That's the consequence of what I was just trying to map. When people do not use their critical abilities to look at reality and ask, does this add up? I mean, you could argue that it's not even cognitive, it's not cerebral, it's not calculated or thought through. It should be intuitive. We should, if we were aligned properly, if you've got good, let's call the word discernment, like we use often theologically, but you could call it intuition if you didn't want to use a theological word. It's resonance. It's what your guts used to tell. When people were walking through a jungle, they could sense the presence of a predator. They just knew. They were tuned in to their environment. They were aligned. We've lost alignment. We are so disconnected now. And we're so in our heads because so much anxiety has been provoked. We're trying to solve problems at a mental level. It's like even in relationships, for example, you cannot conduct relationships while you're overthinking everything. It's the opposite. You'll never analyze your way to improving a relationship. You've got to be much more centered in yourself, in your presence, and you need to show up, and you need to be present, and you need to demand, in inverted commas, that anybody who you relate to shows up as well. You don't need to analyze what's right, what's wrong. They did this, I did that, because all you'll do is tie yourself in knots, and you'll never find the answer because the answer isn't going to be found at that level. The mind will always distort the analysis of what's going on. You can't solve the problem at that level. You've got to become aligned. And when people lose alignment, they can get decoyed very easily because somebody sets some little trap off. Some rabbit runs over here and the greyhound chases it by nature. Hey, look, it's a rabbit. Chase it. And then it's off down there. And then all the other greyhounds go, I want to get it first. Next thing you know, they're running around track after a hare or a rabbit that's not even real, exhausting themselves out so some people can bet on it for a bit of fun and make a few quid. That we're all running around chasing a fake rabbit because nobody thought, hey up, I don't move like a rabbit. She's been going round in a circle. It's not a very creative rabbit. Rabbits I used to see when I was on field frolicking around, they move this way and that, you know. It was like there were grass and all kinds of obstacles, and they're a bit smarter. This dumb thing just moves faster than me. And I'm stupid for keep trying to catch it because I never can. Because whenever I get close, it just speeds up. So it ended there. You don't expect a greyhound to wick it out because it's instinctively wired into its system, chase the small furry thing that's running away. Unfortunately, that's how we've been decoyed. we've been programmed and we've been reduced in a, let's call it frequency, because we become fixated. We've been trained, and so how's that going to change? It's not in their interests to say, hey, you lot in your prison there that we put you in, would you like some freedom? They're just going to ramp it up and do everything to put us back in that prison. So it's our responsibility at the end of the day.
People don't want responsibility. They don't want any responsibility. It's got to be somebody else's fault or somebody else's problem until it knocks on your door. But like I said, what about if you're the last person in your street because it hasn't affected you, but now it's going to affect you? Do we get to that point where it's done like that? I think in certain aspects, certainly certain countries, that's already happened or happening. It's, have we got enough people who are switched on and doing something? Because, you know, there's a lot of times you can speak to people who've got a lot of knowledge, but they're not even speaking to others. You know, they're tired. They don't want to do it anymore. And I understand that. I understand with the attacks that happen. But if every one of us do that little bit, that one bit, learn something new, understand it, can you challenge it? Can you ask questions? You know, we've said it all before about, well, write to your MP. Write to your MP, but direct them, challenge them, and I mean, we've got people who are voting for pregnancy to be terminated up to coming out. Now, it's not that great a leap to think that, well, maybe giving them 6 months, maybe they don't want the baby, maybe they don't like it, maybe it's wrong eye colour because they forgot to choose it. Are we miles away from that if we can terminate a pregnancy right up till birth? I mean, I think that's just like in such a dangerous place that we've never been into that kind of a territory. If we look back to the 1980s, not only did we have the paedophile information exchange, PI, trying to become a political party whose manifesto was going to try and lower the age of consent to 10. You had NAMBLA over in America, North American Man-Boy Love Association, all trying to become, you know, normal. And we hear that term normalized. Well, we've got all kinds that have been normalized, Alex. You can identify as a cat and have a shit in a tray in school. So what's the next step? Because they've got to get to, there is no gender. There isn't any. It's just androgynous. You can do whatever you want and be whatever you want. Well, maybe that's what the angels can do in their environment, in their first estate. But they were greedy. They wanted, them women are fit. Let's have a bit of that. And they decided, and they came here with all the magic and stuff like that. And the women, oh, a bit of magic. What? New shoes? I'll have some of that. Now, is that all women? No, but there was women that was seduced by that. And there's women who actively went to be seduced of that. We saw it in the Adam and Eve story where just so subtle. You could be like gods, knowing good and evil. Well, the point is you have to know the difference between good and evil if you're ever put into that position. So God was trying to train Adam, teach Adam, but then it all changed with that first slip up, I should say, because then the light that was for all the other people had been diminished.
Yeah. I mean, again, if you just bring back this abortion issue, one of the problems again we've got is when we talk about human rights, we've then got to, realistically, if we're critical, we've got to go, well, which human? Which human's rights? So if you focus on rights and human rights, it seems so logical. We're all human beings, so human rights should be the centre. No, because again, human rights then gets watered down. It's the rights of the mother. And all these emotive arguments get used exclusively the rights of the mother. Then you'll get the Greens, the insane Greens and others of that ilk, extreme Democrats, extreme humanitarians in the classic sense, who try and claim the moral high ground, taking that line. having compassion for one aspect of the equation and no compassion for any of the others. So what you need, rather than a focus on rights, which is not self-evident what that actually means, you've got to ask whose rights, but they don't, is what's the sacred? What's sacred? Do we hold anything sacred anymore? People don't like the word sacred because one man's meat is another man's poison, and they take it immediately into religion and different perspectives on right and wrong. It's not primarily a moral character. So like I was hinting at before, when religion starts to die in its classic forms, morality takes its place, and morality supports views of rights, human rights, then which humans they are gets defined, and suddenly it's women's rights over against the rights of all stakeholders, including fathers, children itself, the wider family, the community. All that gets excluded. My body, my rights, woman's rights. And you go, where's that come from? It's only a part of the truth. You need to take a very nuanced view of these really hot potato topics, but it doesn't happen. It just gets subsumed. So once you get principles like sacredness, it's a different ball game, but people don't want to go there. So we've got to find a way somehow of re-establishing what the sacred is, because, you know, regardless of what religious affiliation you take, when you just get into the exclusively secular, the operating system that people are using is all based on moralistic categories that are empty, get translated into laws. A small contingent legislates on behalf of another contingent and against all the other contingents. So what happens is you get division, and then you get people aligning around divisions and fighting across these different fences that they've erected. But what really knocks those fences down is the sacred. And so we have to ask, what is the sacred? And, you know, again, coming back to a Christian or a Christological point of view, life is sacred. Death is not part of the design. We are all born into a world where we are born, we mature, and then we decline, and then we die. So life is sacred. How is that principle of life and its sacredness going to be redeemed? And this is why all these other religions, they don't have any answer. They have no remedy. They don't look at the actual root problem, and they don't suggest that certain things need to happen, not just have happened as per, in case of Christianity, the cross, death, resurrection, ascension, coming of the Spirit. You know, it's like, what do we have to do? Well, we have to accept the free gift. We have to accept the remedy. That's the remedy that's on offer. That's the only one that deals with the problem. Once we've dealt with it, you can sweep the room clean and start again. You have a fresh start. Then you can build something different. It's going to mean you're going to have to partner with the one that provided the remedy. For some reason, nobody's interested in that. They just want to complain about how bad the culture is, how bad this is, how bad that is. That's where this theme again about good news and bad news is legitimate. You know, if we stay stuck in a mentality of how crap the world is, then of course, yeah, it'll be crap. But it's not like there isn't a solution. It's just that most people are not interested in that solution.
That's like being stuck in the same frequency, repeating all and time again. The resets that must have happened. I mean, we've had resets before. World War I reset, World War II reset. Everything since World War II, with an education system, with, you know, we've said before, entertainments, drugs, alcohol, everything being promoted. You know, whatever your vice, Alex, whatever you want, you can have. Whatever you want, you can have. And God says, yeah, you can have it. It's all yours. You can do what you want, but it's not all good for you. And this isn't going to last forever. And if you've not repented from doing this, then you'll go with the world, because we are born into a world that is dying. God has stretched this time out to where we don't know what we're in. You know, we've got people arguing, Alex, over millennial reigns and stuff like that. When we look at the Bible, Daniel 9:27, if it's saying that Messiah is cut off after 69 weeks in the midst of the week, that means Messiah is cut off in the 70th week of Daniel in the middle. Now, 70th week is split with 3.5, isn't it? So we're in the second half of Daniel's 70th week. So that means there's a lot to take in compared to what the religions teach about that. You know, because suddenly you've got to find out, where's this pre-trib rapture coming if we're in the second half of it now? Well, we can't find it. The dispensationalist says it's already happened. You know, we've got all these people who believe all these things, yet the scripture's very, very straight down the line specific. Nobody wants to do that, though, like you said. Nobody wants to follow the word of God because they don't believe it to be the word of God. So if you don't believe in the Son, you don't have anything. And that's the remedy. And it's your choice to do that. The factor is, though, if you're ignorant of so much that you can't make that informed choice here, then there is a I don't like to use dispensation. There's something there that God will say, knowing they need to know. They must know the truth. That's why Scripture says every man and woman will know it, and then they'll make a decision. And it's up here what you were saying. We need to reason and then discern this and process it and say, yeah, God, that's right. That's right. I know that's right. Or if it's wrong, reason. This is your eternity, your salvation, your relationship. It's not somebody else's relationship. Somebody who's a pagan, not walking with God, but he's got the law written in his heart, then it's not my judgment. He's not my servant. He's God's servant. What's it to me? So we've got all these things that we need to take in as a factor, but we also must understand that the reality that we observe, it's only when every atom exists all at the same time in all space-time continuum until the observer collapses that reality into their frequency. So if we are constantly in a state of fear, then that's the frequency that we inherit. Let him who's filthy be filthy still. If you can't stop doing what you're doing and understand the remedy, understand the truth, then you're going to continue doing that. But I think once you become born again and you become wary of that, you certainly want to go the other way. But you get taps on your shoulder, Alex. You know it yourself. You get your head turned trying to pull you back into that black hole where light doesn't escape. And you've got to keep saying, no, keep your focus. Why? Because that's the only way. It's such a simple thing that people don't see it. The simplicity of Christ and the gospel, mate. Once I read it and I understood it logically, it was the remedy. I just didn't know how it worked because how do you believe? And it's then where you get caught, where everything that's in the world that you've been taught to fear, all those childhood traumas, the traumas that it's caused now, armed police, all that kind of stuff, knowing that all these liars believe that they're doing something right. We're not too far away from killing people because God told them to, mate.
Yeah, well, I mean, just, building on this point in a way that hopefully makes it simple to understand what's at stake. When Jesus rebuked the devil in the temptation situation in Matthew 4, Jesus said, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. That's worth meditating on, reflecting upon for some time, to work out what it doesn't say. Jesus doesn't say, man shall not live by bread, because that wouldn't be true. Man shall live by bread on one level, but he shall not live by bread alone. What has primacy is every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. So he's asking, what is it that sustains the human being? So Jesus was hungry at the time. He'd been fasting 40 days and nights. He will have been delirious in the desert heat. And he was almost potentially seeing stones as something that could easily be turned to bread. He was a vulnerable point in his humanity. And he was able at that point to discern what was going on, that he was being tempted. He had that alignment, that attunement, he had a relationship with God. So he didn't fall into the trap of turning the stone into bread like any one of us would have been susceptible. That stomach would have been gnawing away, speaking to my mind. It's food. I need to eat food. And you forget, and then you go for the food, and he would have performed a miracle, and we'd have all been busted. But he was the perfect one who didn't surrender to that temptation. Listen, temptation was real. Most of us would fall because bread is important. God designed us. That's why they were fed manna in the desert when they were wandering around. They were in no position. There were no supermarkets then. Manna from heaven, basic food that they could eat to keep them sustained. So we need it, but not by bread alone. The primacy is every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. So the question is, that's always the answer. Man shall not live by all these things he sees all around him. He shall not live because he's driven by sexual drives or by her sexual drives. You know, they're all appetites. They're all things that were good. They were a part of us, part of the creation. They got distorted. They became idols. They became more important. We lived by the senses only. We sought pleasure only. And then we find, to quote Laurel and Hardy, that's another fine mess you got me into. And we get ourselves into this mess, and we get each other, we invite each other to the dance of stepping into each other's mess. And let's all be messy together. And ultimately, that simple statement of Jesus is, every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. Stay on that narrow path. That's the foundation of everything else. It doesn't mean you don't need to eat. It doesn't mean you don't need to fulfill certain desires, but they all need to be under the divine canopy. And when they're not, that's when the problems start. So it's like the world needs a reset, and that's what Jesus came for. Unfortunately, we could say fortunately, unfortunately, the Lord doesn't override our will. So it's fortunate, really. So he lets us mess up, and he lets it get to a stage when it's going to get terribly oppressive, which is, we're starting to see it now. Will people ask the question, what's going on here? Or will they stick their head in the sand again? This is what we say every week, and that's why we're doing this every week, because people stick their head in the sand. We're preaching to the choir, but the difference is everybody who watches us knows that what we're talking about is happening, but maybe they've got a different solution to what's going on, like sort the birth certificate out, do this. You know, instead of eating your bread, don't trust every word that comes from the mouth of God. Get involved with common law court, get yourself issued a different sort of certification, and stand on that. That might have some merit, but it's not going to cover your eternal soul. If you think that's going to liberate your eternal soul just because you did that, it might have its place. It's a part of the incarceration and imprisonment that humans experience in this fallen world, but it ain't the answer. Correcting the things that are wrong at face value, sorting out the council tax issue, brilliant. Imagine it was sorted tomorrow. The fraud stops. Is evil and sin going to stop? Is that serpent that's hiding, is he going to be a trickster and morph into some other form of evil and take us in some other area? Even if we put out one fire, another fire is going to turn up somewhere else. So the reality is, all these solutions at best, if we manage to come together and turn it around at that level, it wouldn't turn the whole ship around, because the serpent as a trickster will morph into something else. And only when you try and take it on in your own strength does that beast power come and crush you. He'll morph into this dragon, this beast, and crush you. I mean, if you're not giving him any pressure, he'll just stay serpentine, hidden. Yeah, because he doesn't need to show himself. But ultimately, none of these partial solutions are going to cut it.
No, I agree. Well, we're touching on how much the powers that be are looking to this deception to be part of this religious battle. You could call it spiritual, because it is a spiritual warfare, but these are religions that are battling each other. You know, it's even when you say you're an atheist, that's part of your religion. Scientology, that's your religion. You're a pagan, you're into nature, you love trees, you love you feel more at one with that. You feel at one with the creation because you are at one with the creation, but you aren't at one with God without Jesus. You can't be. You're detached. That was the whole point of Lazarus and the rich man. You're detached. You might have looked like you loved me and you gave money and tithes and stuff, but you didn't do what I asked. You didn't do what I said. You didn't care. You thought you could just do what you wanted. That's not what this is about. There's a reason you go into somewhere, you're given rules and regulations for your safety. If you then go beyond that, then there's consequences to pay for that, and you can't keep blaming everybody else. The problem that we've got is we don't know who to blame because we don't know it's us. We don't know that it's us because it's normal to act like we act in society, Alex. Nobody knows it's wrong because it doesn't feel wrong, because God is love and you love doing that and nobody's getting hurt, so everything's okay. We've been brainwashed into thinking that that is okay, and it's the only way you can look at it, because children will carry on as what they've been taught. If they're teaching up to the age of 5 is just all chaos and nothing, no stability whatsoever, then you are going to see chaos come in that child's life. I saw it for 15 years. So if we look at this now, where we've heard a lot about people talking about antichrists, the system is antichrist, but we have got this man of perdition. Whether the fingers pointing towards this direction is right or not, it's certainly direction that we should have a look into, see what's being ushered in, because there's a lot of claims being made in this video, Alex. And if true, do they have the misgivings that it seems to have, shall we say?
Jared Kushner is a Zionist tool. He is an instrument of the deep state, and he is sexually and financially compromised, according to MI6 and some CIA sources, not official. He is owned by Zionist sugar daddies. First you buy a newspaper, then you marry the daughter, then you buy a building, then you get the dad, then you take his power. This is actually on Bloomberg as how Jared Kushner is going to execute patricide. What people don't understand is that Ivanka Trump was profiled by Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, both of them Mossad agents. Ghislaine Maxwell is the daughter of Robert Maxwell, who is the most famous Zionist spy in the United States of America. So my bottom line on Jared Kushner is that he is known to be an agent of a foreign power. He is known to be an Israeli firster. He is known to have executed some very bad business deals, and he is known to have been bailed out on his 666 Mark of the Beast building by Qatar. Okay? So he's compromised in every possible way.
So have we got a potential being set up here? I mean, they're talking that he's been groomed. Everything. Ivanka Trump was profiled for this. We have seen this happen so many times in history, and now we're watching it play out, but we're watching it as if it's just normal. So again, it doesn't really matter what people are believing. These people seem to believe what they're doing, and that guy brought in the Noahide laws. So we're seeing all these. Qatar bailed him out. We've seen Israel bomb Qatar. We've seen Iran allegedly bomb Qatar, but Israel is being pointed at for it. We've got this massive mess where all of a sudden we've got mainstream news turning on the regime of Israel while still talking about anti-Semitism. So we're creating a real cognitive dissonance of a melting pot here, Alex.
Yeah, we are. And I mean, I have a particular view about all the Antichrist stuff now. And it's difficult for me because I can't view it from a theoretical perspective anymore. So I've got to be completely honest about it. I think that this stuff is happening, it's unfolding. And I just find it interesting. I mean, it doesn't worry me. I mean, I think one of the things we have to kill is fear. You know, if you look at the Omen films and everything, people have been pumped with fear for a long time. And even Satan, you know, is an angel. And you know, we talked about this time last year, Paul, that however you conceive the emergence and development of our concept of Satan, it's complex, and we kind of charted it. The reality is he's a fallen angel unless we give him more power. Now, I look at somebody like Jared Kushner, and he might have a certain amount of power. He might be being groomed for a role. He's just like an unimpressive human being. And you know, whenever we have concepts of the Antichrist, we tend to think, like, you know, when people used to call him old sausage fingers, Charles. Do you think Charles could be the Antichrist? I mean, at the end of the day, if he could, I mean, I'd be laughing. And it's the same with Kushner. I mean, you know, Trump looks like he might be a bit more credible, you know, because he's got that bluster about him. You know, it's the braggart part of it. Kushner just seems a bit quiet and a bit, you know, can you imagine him just sort of leaping out to the stage and doing all these signs and wonders? It just seems a bit. I mean, it'd be so obvious as well. I mean,
yeah, I can. I could imagine that. I could imagine the beast coming out the pit, Apollyon just jumping on that stage, jumping straight inside him and going, "I'm here."
Yeah, I mean, in a possession. I mean, if you know, I mean, this raises interesting questions about the modality of how all this happens, because there's a tension between the literal and the mythological. Mythological doesn't mean false. It just means even in the kind of the dream language of Revelation, which is very fragmented, that there's an inflation because people are carried along by cosmic stories. It's a cosmic drama, and you know, people watch soap operas for a reason. You know, people become engaged. You know, like reality TV at the beginning. In theory, it should have been boring, but they managed to turn out something interesting through dramas and scandals. So these things capture the imagination, but that's precisely the danger that they carry. I'm always sort of coming back to, yeah, okay, so there's an overlay of the mythology here, but in reality, that's going to translate to a human being doing certain things. So yeah, if you have a possession narrative, if suddenly Apollyon comes up and possesses this person who was beforehand just meek and mild, and all of a sudden he becomes almost like what you saw in the movie Split, you know, and so you can say, you know, James McAvoy, you look at it, you go, yeah, we've got these movie representations, we've got these concepts. We ask, well, how does it happen? What would the mechanism be by someone like Clark Kent becomes Superman, Jared becomes the Antichrist, he goes into a phone box as Jared Kushner, maybe he's a bit dweeby, he comes out as 15 times the size, you know, and whatever, and he's like a super Nephilim. I don't know. It's like how dramatic do you want to make it? But the point is, if we're going to discern properly, it's important we don't get into too much mythic inflation, because if we do, and we're carrying a concept of a Clark Kent to Superman, and it doesn't happen like that, we can be looking in the wrong direction. All this stuff is quite potentially subtle. And how people get taken in by signs and wonders in a world in which we don't see signs and wonders. So, you know, that Dragonfire laser that the UK have got, it's called Dragonfire. It brings fire down from heaven to earth in the presence of men, which can bring about awe, shock and awe. So ultimately, that's a non-supernatural way of understanding what the predictive symbology of John on the Isle of Patmos could have seen. That resolves the tension so that we don't necessarily need to look for something supernatural. It would have looked supernatural to a visionary on an island in around 95 AD. Not so much to us. It's still got the awe dimension, it's still got the power dimension, it's still got the beast dimension, but it's no longer supernatural. So we have fed through our Omen movies this Antichrist supernatural thing, which inflates Satan to a level that he doesn't have. He's just a fallen angel. So I think we've got to keep a rein on fear. We've got to be realistic. It will be grim. The persecution will be real. But how far the supernatural stuff is classically supernatural, and how far it's simply incredibly powerful and incredibly destructive and does bring about fear, I think we've got to think critically about those things because we don't really know. We're all guessing. And the mistake would be to become too sure that we knew how it was going to present and actually discover later on that we've been decoyed. Just like we might with having a pre-trib rapture false doctrine. If we have false concepts in mythic inflation, it can take us away from the realism that might present. And how Dweeby Kushner might in fact become a very convincing Antichrist for reasons that we can't imagine if all we've watched is Omen movies.
I think that's the point to it, because people will be more accepting of it when something like that happens. But you know, the fella is here. He is on the stage, but he's not on the stage. There is nefarious things around him. He is part of this religious system that's been brought in. Compromised or not, he's playing the part. But is he that man of perdition? Is he that body where the man of perdition is going to inhabit? No, definitely not. I don't think we could even get bogged down with those types of predictions. We've just got to watch the signs. Israel's getting surrounded and they're doing themselves no favors. Netanyahu seems to be going out of his way. And then you've got Iran who says, yeah, the straits are open, and then Donald Trump comes in and says something about, yeah, they won't be shut again. So Iran say, not having that, we're shutting it. So we've got the okey-cokey going on over in the Hormuz Straits. It's laughable. If it wasn't so serious, as in people are seeing petrol and diesel prices skyrocket rocket for no reason other than we can pretend because it's wars and rumours of wars. So I think it's got a real physical effect on people as well. And I think along with the psychological stuff where they're talking, lockdowns and stuff like that, more coming. You just never know. You just never know where things are.
Yeah.
Taylor.
I mean,
Taylor,
just on that,
with
Paul, just one last thing, Paul, before we. One thing I would just say is the simple rule of thumb I would say for people in this Middle East situation now is to ask a simple question: Yahweh and Allah. Now, basically, there are liberals in the West and even certain Christians that just say, yeah, Allah and Yahweh are the same. It's the same God, right? And there are those who insist that Yahweh and Allah are not the same God. Now, most Muslims would say that Allah is Yahweh. They would, because they say it's the same God, because it's the monotheism. Now, I don't know what some Jews might make of this. I would imagine Jews would take a slightly different view, and that's why they'd be less than popular, because they're a bit more sectarian in their understanding. You know, they were the originary concept, and I suspect Allah still comes from El, which was a more regional understanding, from which the whole tribal situation, kicked off. So that is, for me, the central plumb line. It's the Yahweh versus Allah issue, and where people are on that spectrum. Then, of course, Jesus comes in as many will say, Yeshua. Obviously, it's fashionable for people to try and rename Jesus Yeshua and go, I've got the truth now just because I renamed Jesus. But obviously, it comes, the roots of Joshua comes from Yahweh with the vowels in, which fits in with the Emmanuel, God with us. So I would just say that's the thing for people to bear in mind, because there'll be all kinds of arguments. If we look at the Noahide laws, that will try and say there's this monotheistic truth where it's the same unitary God, which is the thing that would bring a certain contingent of Jews and Muslims together, if that were possible, and force out the Trinitarian Christians.
Yeah, and the ones who don't believe in those Noahide laws, either the Muslims who don't believe that it's the same God or whatever, and definitely the Christians, they're the ones that will be singled out. All the others won't care. If you're an atheist, you won't care. If you're a pagan, you won't care, because it's going to incorporate all those nice things. The problem is when we get down to this idolatry thing, we can talk about statues and busts and stuff like that, but we can also talk about actors, football, all different kinds of idols, bread and circuses, all that kind of stuff. But what we're seeing coming with these two religions is on some level they all agree. If they can get the majority, like you say, to agree that this God is the same God to everybody, and the Catholics now say that all religions lead to the same God, which, you know, they're certainly not reading the same scriptures that I'm reading. This is why when I speak to people who say, well, I don't do religion because of this, the Bible's not religion. It's so far from religion. That's why I can't go to any churches, because they teach religion. They've got a belief, and it's not based on the scriptures. So I think when we're looking at this now, you're right. We've got to be reserved on all the theories that we can come up with, because there's been so many. You know, we've even took it down to the, you know, the print when you were talking about the Prince Charles route, it could be Prince William, because it's the right bloodline, and it's to do with all the royal heritage on the flags and stuff like that. There's all these theories that we could incorporate, but we've got to watch on who's acting and who's doing the angles. If you see Charles is more related to the WEF, and those globalists are the ones that Taylor says Trump and them have defeated it, and this is why this is playing out this way. So we've got then Kushner coming from Trump's side, and I'll be honest, I don't know what his bloodline or anything is, but they're related to this regime that, you know, Israel is going to be left to last type thing. Even in our scriptures, that this synagogue of Satan is going to be the last one that's going to be taken out, dealt with. But we've got to watch the actions. The one, he's been involved with these Noahide laws and what the ramifications are of that. Yeah, he doesn't look the part, Alex, but you know, we've seen people who don't look the part become things. You know, I mean, look at Bill Gates. He doesn't look the part of a mass genocidist, does he? But he plays his part in it. When we look at a film like Ghostbusters, Rick Moranis, you couldn't play a more stereotypical nerd, but he didn't have to play a good demon when he was taken over. So we've got to say plausibility, but we watch. We have to keep watch. Those who aren't watching, they're the ones who are going to get caught up.
Yeah.
Taylor, are you with us?
Yes, I am. I am right here.
Well, hello and good night. You've got 10 minutes, mate. You've been busy again, pal.
Yeah, I'm shuffling through different things, and it's kind of hectic because I got several things going on. You know, I got different people I have to talk to regarding different things. So it can be a bit hectic. I try to squeeze in. I try to squeeze in as much room as I can for here. So.
Yeah, it's no worries, mate. You either come on or you don't, lad. But we appreciate you giving your time. But like I said, we're near enough at the end of the show now. But if you've got 10 minutes worth of pearls of wisdom to give us, mate.
Yes, I will. So, we have this whole thing going on now in the narrative space. Now we have coming back in, we have the Harvey Weinstein case coming in, and we have the Me Too movement possibly coming back. Meanwhile, you also have what was it? Oh yeah, the Eric Swallowswell case, which is conveniently happening at the exact same time that Harvey Weinstein's coming back onto the scene. You know, as we know, there is no coincidences in this. In a scripted movie, so we have this whole thing going back toward the Me Too movement. We've had several people talking about how there's going to be a whole bunch of more takedowns of certain people who are women abusers and stuff like that. We have, going back even further, we have the we have the Wiener laptop coming back into the scene again. which is good, because obviously that's where the Hillary Clinton email scandal came from. We also have the, what was it again? We have the Hunter Biden story coming back into the fold. Q talked about how things are going to be done in waves, expect waves. And it looks like that we're heading to those waves right now. Because, as time goes on, this operation goes forward. It seems like that the further we go, the older, the more the oldest first ever Q posts become more and more relevant as time goes on. Which really shows just how that they had this whole thing planned from the very beginning, down to possibly even the minute details. Meanwhile, we have this whole thing. Obviously, we have the Iran thing taking the majority of the spotlight in the narrative space, but it doesn't mean that the Epstein story is not going away, because it's hilarious. Because right now, the Gaza, the whole wag of the Gaza thing, right? That we had 2 years of this fake war in Gaza, and it's clearly its main purpose was to kill the reputation of Israel, who had before that Israel at its peak was over 90% popularity amongst the American people. Nowadays it's less than like 40-30%. And and amplifying that even further is the MSM, the Q-controlled MSM media. We have QNN, as I like to call it now, QNN, with what's his face, the guy that enthusiastically does all the polls on it, telling the public how, with Republicans and Democrats alike, so this is a bipartisan thing, the image of Israel is going down and down and down, and this causes this is another sign, another proof that this is not the MSM of old, because the way that the MSM of old worked was that if something was going to hurt them, they wouldn't even report on it. They would just ignore it. Because what they do is, by reporting on a story like this, saying that the reputation of Israel is down in the American public, it causes a lemming effect. And people see that and they say, oh, look, everyone hates Israel. Well, I guess I don't like Israel down too, because how normies are. They don't like to think. They just react. So, that causes even further harm. The New York Times is doing the exact same thing, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then on top of that, even in the evangelical base, the Christian Zionist base is still it's starting to go down. So on the one hand, on the left, you have these the people on the hardcore left who hate Israel because of their because they look at it as a colonized state, right? The West is America's stolen land kind of thing. So they go with that narrative for Israel, even though they're technically right with Israel. It still serves the same purpose. And then, of course, the people on the right who despise Israel, the Tucker Carlson viewers and all that, talking about, revealing more and more stuff that Israel has done in the past, how they're a criminal regime. So this is a pincer movement that is going on, and it's killing the reputation of, let's be realistic here, the head of the snake. The New World Order head of the snake has, ever since 1948, has been the state of Israel, using the United States and the United Kingdom and the EU and NATO as its proxies. So this is a really, really good further in developments. Now we're at the point where, again, the whole Gaza thing killed the reputation of Israel, and now this whole fake Iran thing, and it's clever the way they're doing it too. They made sure they didn't wait too long after this whole Gaza thing went away to start this Iran thing, because how normies are. They're quick to forget about stuff, right? It's like just a couple months after something happens, they're already forgotten about it. Well, right away they just start up this whole Iran thing, and now now the purpose of this Iran thing clearly is to link Israel, the stench of Israel, as Mike King so eloquently puts it, to because Israel's already been defeated. Now it's just a matter of killing of exposing it and its roots to the public. So right now we have we have these so-called Iran videos, these Lego videos, clearly white hat engineered videos. You have the linking Trump to Netanyahu. It's really clever. This explains why they needed Trump in office, optically anyway, in order to start linking Israel to American politics. Because the Democrats, yeah, they've been on Israel's ticket as well. But they're more of the, how should I put this? They're more of the Marxist globalist type of type rather than the Zionist neocon type, which has been mostly infected the Republican Party since the days of Reagan. So it's clever. They're using Trump as a scapegoat in order to be able to expose Israel's control of American politics going back decades.
But he's willing to be that scapegoat, yeah?
Absolutely, yeah. And of course, he's going to walk out. He's going to walk out at the end, redeemed. I don't know how they're going to do it. Most likely, what they're going to do is they're probably going to say something like, I don't have the script in hand, obviously, but most likely what they're going to do is they're going to probably say, "Oh, I got bad advice from people below me who I trusted, like maybe Jared Kushner or something like that, or Marco Rubio, people like that," and just use that as an excuse, and then. Obviously, once the Epstein files fully come out and Trump is exonerated, he's not, because, we know that Trump, obviously didn't diddle children. They're not going to run with that narrative. So once that whole thing comes out and Trump is exonerated, but that's going to be a bit from now because, we're not going to get any of the Epstein stuff or the 9/11 stuff or any of that. We're not going to get any of that stuff until Israel has been fully exposed as having been in control of American politics going back decades, because at the end of the day, all of these things lead back to Israel. And just as Q said, we're saving Israel for last. Not a specific reason named at this time, and now we can clearly see that reason, because they're the head of the snake. And it's a gradual process.
I can't disagree with you on the head of the snake, but can't disagree with you on that one, mate. Well, we're about to wrap the show up, Taylor, so have you got anything from your neighborhood?
I've been paying so much attention. I've been paying so much attention to the geopolitical realm that I haven't even really been paying attention to my to my specific area. Though I will say that even on local news, they do talk about the whole thing going on in Iran with Trump, which shows obviously just how big this whole thing is. So yeah, I mean. Unfortunately, my state is still under communist, communist rule at the moment. Although, that being said, it looks like that things are starting to turn around, which is really, really good, because this whole fraud and illegal immigrant agenda hasn't gone away. Just because it's not being shown prominently. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we do know what it means, don't we, Alex?
We do. And I mean, how does that fit in, Taylor? Because obviously these migrants are coming in. How does that fit into the framework for you then with the migrants? I mean, obviously they want to come in. There are people trafficking them. The authorities seem to be allowing them in. It feels a bit drastic. If you were to apply the normal criteria that it's optics, the problem is going to be when they're in, how do you get them out afterwards?
Well, first of all, I mentioned this before also, is that, this whole insane migrant narrative that we've been given over the last several years since mainly the fake Biden days. They keep telling us that 20 million illegals came in under Biden. Well, I would beg to disagree with that one, because I've seen interviews of people on the ground, and they show the same pictures that the media shows. With the whole they show the crowd in a line going in and crossing the border, or the people on the boats, etc. This is a heavily exaggerated story that's been told to us for a long time. That's not saying that there wasn't any of that going on, obviously, but it was heavily exacerbated for the sake of pissing off the public. And most of these illegals and illegals, by the way, that came here and that have been being deported and that we've been hearing about, mostly came in under. I'm not sure about the UK. I'm just speaking for US. Came in under the Obama administration. Because, people say that he's a deporter in chief. Well, he really wasn't. He was the one that let in all of these millions and millions of illegals into the country. during, in particular, during 2014, 2015, during his second term. That was that was when the real hard migration crisis hit, and they're using that. And because obviously you can't just say, oh, this thing that happened 10 years ago or 15 years ago, you should be pissed about it, because people don't give a damn. People only care about what's happening right now. That's why you can't use 9/11 as a way to wake people up. You have to frame something in the here and now in order to get people pissed off, and then you link it to something that happened in the past. So, for example, this whole 10/7 thing, or this Iran thing, if it comes out that, oh, it's all Israel, which is already being seeded into the public narrative that this is all Israel's doing. Obviously, public image, of course. Then you can link it. Then when people are so fed up with Israel, you link it back to, and people are more open to the idea that Israel is a criminal regime country. Not the people living in it, obviously, but the people that have run the country, like Netanyahu, etc. Then you can link that back to and when you link it to Epstein, how Epstein was a Israeli Mossad puppets, then and only then can you link it back to the stuff like 9/11, JFK, and all that other stuff, the real stuff. So basically the idea is you make all this fake narratives up in order to get people pissed off, in order to expose the real stuff that they did in the past. So it's really clever. And about the migrant thing, yeah, I mean, like, it doesn't change the fact that this country has been, and yours as well, of course, have been infested with the illegals. But it's not just the illegals that we need to worry about. It's also the legal immigration as well, which I actually personally think is worse than the illegal immigration. Because, I'm just going to say this right here. I'll try to make it quick because I know we're low on time. That, obviously you can get a lot more people behind the idea of stopping illegal immigration than legal immigration, because illegal by definition is illegal. But, people are so quick to be allowed all this legal immigration, so-called legal immigration of tens of millions of people from the third world into the country, is letting them in, which has really messed up the demographics. Most of the people that we've seen in these cities that have been doing that have been doing all the crimes and stuff are legal immigrants.
So how Taylor, how do you were you aware about what happened in Hungary with Viktor Orban losing and this new guy Magyar coming in, and it looked as if he was going to reverse the policies of Orban and actually comply with the EU and allow loads of migration? That was only on Sunday evening, but actually now he's turned around and he's really kicked the EU, because von der Leyen and a few of the others were all like crowing. Obama was crowing at what a fantastic victory it was for democracy, and that Europe could be restored to its former glory. And now this Magyar guy has completely turned it around. So, I mean, do you follow that? What do you make of that analog in Europe and Hungary in particular, and Orban, who was obviously typically right wing?
Well, first of all, I was laughing when I heard about that. It's like, you thought we were going to go leftward. Well, go fuck yourself. Part of my language. But also, you have, this reminds me of what happened in Japan a couple months ago when they got that new prime minister, and they were talking about how they were going to start allowing illegals in and all that, opening up the borders, and then right away, that's they basically shut that down. I don't exactly know what the point of that is. I'm assuming that, like, this is just my guess, right? Is that they're probably doing that just to show the rest of the world, rest of the libtarded world, like the UK, the US, France, etc. Just how potentially dangerous it is to allow how dangerous it actually is to allow all these immigrants into your country. Because, there's still all the libtards that still think that, immigration is our strength, despite everything that's happened. So you have to keep hitting that narrative hard. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's just my guess. I can't say for certain, but obviously we know that Hungary's not going to go the way of multiculturalism and any of that, because they've always been close to Russia and China, so that's not going to happen. But the movie has to play out in a way where people see certain things to get certain reactions, What exactly they are really depends on depends on what point of the movie you're talking about, really.
Yeah.
I think they're looking at free playing on a solo guitar here at the minute, though. I think there's so much potential for lots of different things to kick off within the next few months. Hopefully next week, Taylor, we'll see things, taking seed and coming to fruition, and we've got a bit of a better picture. Thanks for giving up some of your time anyway, mate. I'll send you the link, and just, if you can come on, you come on. You don't have to apologize or anything about it, mate. You've got a life.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate you guys, and of course you guys for letting me on as well. I always appreciate that.
No worries, mate. Just give you contact details. I've not got round to the videos you sent me yet because you've emailed them. I tend not to go into my emails every day, so I'll try and check a couple of them out.
I haven't emailed you at all.
Yeah, Raconteurs report.
Oh, you mean on Rumble? Yeah, that's what you. I thought you meant from. I thought you meant from on YouTube. Okay, my bad.
Yeah, I only get notified on my emails from Rumble. So.
Taylor, I just want to ask you something. Has anything changed for you in the last 2 or 3 weeks?
Has anything changed for me?
Yeah. You're coming. I don't know. Something feels like it shifted. Like you feel more measured. I don't know. There's something seems to have shifted for you, mate.
I don't really feel like anything's changed. Nothing's happened in my personal life. Although, hold on, I need to whisper this.
Right.
So, last week, my mom overheard me talking to you guys. She did the stupid BS again of I'm gonna shut the internet off if I hear you mention Trump. It's so bad. It's like all I have to do is all she has to hear is just the word Trump. Like, doesn't even know the context or anything. Just starts flipping out like a freaking like Rachel Maddow. It's just and this is I'm just gonna say this right now, and for the record, I didn't start doing videos and podcasts and stuff with the intention in mind of making a living off of it, because obviously it takes a lot of work. But I'm praying that eventually that I can start to make a stable income off of it, so that way that I can move out and get my own place and not have to deal with this anymore. I don't hate my family. I don't hate my family, of course. God gave me this family, so I have no reason to. Of course, I love them, but at the same time, that doesn't mean that I have to I like to look at it this way. You can love your family as a family, but you can dislike them as a person.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. So when you say praying, is that just a metaphor, or are you actually praying?
Both.
Wow, brilliant. Good to hear, Taylor. There's definitely a change, and I think me and Paul will remember you in prayer, Taylor, because this I sense a maturational moment, and when I say that, I'm not intending to be patronising. You're a young chap, but you're doing well. And I think it's a noble goal to attempt to. It takes hard work to monetize a channel, but the fact that you've got the vision is a very positive thing. And I think we're 100% behind you, mate. So, whenever you want to talk about that, any help we can give you, we'll give you all the help we can.
I appreciate that. It's just sometimes though, I feel like I'm being like a selfish dick if I pray to God for something to happen in my personal life that benefits me. It's like, oh, I'm praying for something selfish kind of thing.
No, he wants to bless you. That's the religion can bring about a lot of guilt, but God loves you, and you're a child of God when you've accepted him. And he wants to bless you, and particularly if you're somebody who wants to bring truth to bear, because what you're doing, you're exposing a lot of lies. You are, when you expose the optics, you're doing a real service for the people. So he just want you to double down. Dot your I's, cross your T's, make sure your journalism's spot on so nobody can expose your flanks, because your honour becomes his honour when you fly the flag in his name. So you're standing up for truth. As long as you do that, don't worry about asking, because he'll provide, because you're doing his work.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Pleasure, mate.
No worries, mate. I'll send you the link for next week. Hopefully, come on a little bit sooner.
Yeah, I'll try my best to. I really appreciate it.
No worries,
Have a
Taylor.
good week,
Take care,
Taylor.
my friend. God
Yeah,
bless.
take care. Yep,
See
God
you
bless,
later.
guys.
Bye-bye.
So, in summing up, sir.
I think last 2 weeks I've been sort of saying this was going to be this, absolutely there'd be this real stuff to. Now it looks like I was wrong. I hope that doesn't make me a false prophet.
We don't know. I think the more that we're thinking about things and verbalizing things, and people are talking about it, I think that changes the frequency. It slows the vibration, dilutes it. I don't know what analogy we could use for it, but the observers change the reality. So if you're trying to create a reality and you have to do manipulation and lies and fraud, that's a lot of plates to keep spinning when people are noticing plates. What are you doing spinning that plate? We're all of a sudden we're starting to have that spiritual warfare and maybe not necessarily understand that that's what we're doing. And I'm speaking to myself here because, as you well know, the amount of attacks and stuff that I've been going through for a while, but particularly in the last couple of weeks, it's stuff that wants to, to put you in bed, put a blanket over you and not want to leave the house, that type of stuff. And the enemy knows that it's winning. That's why you can only do those bits that you can do. When you can't leave the house, when you can't do something, what else can you do? Look at this, Alex. This is all, as you said at the start of the show, this is a platform that reaches 200 to 300 people a week. That's all we can do because we've been into the courts, we've been into the battlefields, we've fought them there. What else can you do? We knew that we needed numbers. We could have changed things. We could have changed the frequency and vibration 10, 15 years ago by this. But now it's different. Now it's down to those individuals. Are they going to step up? Well, when you can't take, when there's nothing left to give from people, then they'll say no. I think that's possibly where we're at now.
Yeah, mate. I think people have got to be galvanized. I think you've got to choose to be strong. The challenges are really pronounced. People are coming under massive pressure, and at those times it does test your foundations. If there's cracks in your foundations and you come under this kind of stress testing, it can break you. But what I found is that every time I feel a vulnerability at all, very quickly now he's reminding me, but it's a gift. It's a gift, Alex, because otherwise you're a human being. And for all your virtues and strengths and all your integrity and all your efforts, you're going to keep failing because I've given you senses and I'm not around in that classic sense, like that chair or that steak. It's going to take your attention. So every time you forget yourself, I'm not going to give you the luxury of forgetting me. I'm just going to prod you. This is vain. This isn't going to get anywhere. That man shall not live by bread alone, but you're living as if he could. I'm just going to give you a tap on the shoulder. No, Alex. Remember, that doesn't work. It's taken me like best part of 6 decades on this planet to realize this, because it doesn't come to us quickly, because, it's persistent, isn't it? You wake up every day. What are you going to do for the minute you wake up? Are you going to get distracted and in your head? Are you going to immediately start scrolling through reels and, distracting yourself and getting onto your treadmill mentally? Or are you going to clear that space, get the foundations right, get your priorities right, and connect with your maker? It's a choice, but it's amazing. Whenever we try and pray or whatever, the distractions come in. I must remember to pray, and then thoughts come into your head and you just don't pray. I need to read the Bible, but you don't do it. So this is always confronting us. And sometimes when we have these difficulties and we're getting tested, we think it's bad. But often, Scripture says, those whom the Lord loves, he reproves. He's doing it because of care, so that we don't forget him, and reminding us, you are but dust. And we are.
The refiner sits by the fire.
Absolutely, mate.
Thanks to everybody in the chat room that's been with us through the live.
Yeah.
And
Cheers, guys.
thanks to everybody who's watching now after the live and watching through the week. We appreciate your views. Please give us a like and a share if you can, and a subscription, because apparently there's something to do with algorithms and stuff like that, but we just leave this to the Lord now, because we've done everything that we could in the past to try and galvanize and bolster everything and think, yeah, that's it, we've done it. But there's always that little bit. Let's just leave it into the hands of somebody who knows what they're doing. And, you know, whilst we do have to engage while we're here, and we do have a monopoly piece. We were talking about monopoly earlier. We have got a monopoly piece. The problem that we've got is we believe that, we've been taught that we are the monopoly piece, and that's not true. So, with that in mind, good night. God bless, guys. See you all next week.
Have a good week.
I've been traveling down a rabbit hole. It's been a heavy year, trying to make the complex simple, trying to make the vision clear. We're born into a system where the ledger's pre-assigned, a credit and a debit in the hallways of the mind. They take your name and register the moment you arrive, setting up an account before you've learned how to survive. They put you on the market, put a value on your head, but they leave you with the labor and the promises instead. For you have to each end, the rich rules over the poor. To a job, to a life, to a false security. But that neon number triggers a ghost within the machine. The mister on the paper, the man you've never been. You're the living soul, the man created by the divine. But they've got you in the straw man shoes, standing in their line. of double dipping, revenue and greed, taking taxes for the contract, then charging for the need, the gas, the water, and the light. They say the debt is rising, while they use your own signature for their own franchising. If you sign the joint GIRO, if you return it to the source, you're balancing the treasury, you're changing up the course. No more austerity, no more the naughty child in fear, just a prosperous economy when the ignorance is clear. Our parents taught us hard work was the only way to pay. But hard work in a debt-based world just wastes the life away. We follow